The coffee at Marty's Diner always smelled better than it tasted, but it was hot, it was cheap, and Linda kept it coming as long as you didn't give her attitude. She topped off my mug without asking. "You look like you slept in that flannel, Mike." "I did sleep in this flannel," I said. "I'm conserving energy." "Yeah, well, conserve some money for a tip." She smirked and tapped her order pad. Usual, I said. "Eggs over easy wheat toast and whatever you call this motor oil. Premium blend," she said already, walking away. The diner was half empty. 2 old guys arguing about baseball at the counter, a young couple sharing pancakes in a booth by the window. Neon from the open sign smeared red across the aluminum edge of my table. It was too early for trouble. Trouble usually waited until after lunch. Linda dropped the check face down by my elbow and slid a card tray with it. "Got you ahead of the rush." "That's optimistic," I said, pulling my debit card from my wallet. "Big spender here." She snapped the card from my hand. "Ooh, plastic. Look at you living large." I watched her walk it over to the register jab at the keypad and slide the card through the reader. The machine gave a polite little beep. She frowned, hit a couple of buttons, swiped it again. This time it beeped longer, louder. Her frown deepened. I raised my voice just enough. "What's the verdict?" She looked back at me, then down at the screen, then back at me again. That look had too much pity in it. "It says declined," she said. "You rich guys always break my heart." Declined. I sat up straighter. "No, run it again. That's got to be a glitch." "I did, sweetie." She held up the machine like a dead animal. "Twice." The 2 old guys at the counter got real quiet. I could feel their eyes slide my way. I pulled my phone out and opened my banking app. The login wheel spun for a second, then the home screen snapped into place. Only the number I usually looked at, the one with my checking balance, was grayed out like an old photograph. Across the top, a red bar, account frozen. Legal hold. I blinked, tapped it with my thumb. A little box popped up, restricted per third-party order. Contact institution. Agency, Maple Ridge Estates, HOA. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered. Linda leaned on the edge of the booth. "That bad? It says my account's frozen. Like, frozen, like no breakfast. Frozen." I held the screen up. "Legal hold. HOA." She whistled. "Well, that's a new trick. They usually just yell about trash cans and lawn height." "Yeah," I said. "I pay them to yell." Freezing my bank account was not in the brochure. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "Look, don't worry about it. You've been coming here longer than the coffee maker. We'll settle up another day. That's not the point." "I know it's not." Her voice softened a hair. "Go talk to your bank, or your HOA, or both. Preferably before lunch." "Linda," I said, "you know anybody else this happened to?" She hesitated, just long enough to make me nervous. "I've heard some people up on Ridge Lane complain. Couple of bounced checks. Same HOA as you, right?" "Same one," I said. She patted the table once, like closing a file. Then, "Start there." I got eggs to burn. I slid out of the booth. The old guys at the counter looked away so fast you'd think they got whiplash. Nobody wants to look too long at someone whose money just evaporated. It feels contagious. Outside, the morning air bit at my cheeks. My truck sat under a street lamp, silver paint gone dull from too many winters. I climbed in, shut the door, and for a second just sat there with the phone in my hand and that red banner staring back at me. Legal hold. Maple Ridge. HOA. The app pinged again, a little yellow icon this time. I tapped it. Payment overdue. HOA assessment, it said. See mailed notices. I closed my eyes and swore under my breath. I knew exactly where those notices were. 10 minutes later, I was at my kitchen table, the laminate chipped along the edges where my kids once carved their initials. The morning light came in low through the back window, catching on a stack of unopened envelopes I'd been ignoring for, well, longer than I should have. Same layout, same logo. Maple Ridge Estates. Homeowners Association in dark green ink. I spread them out like a losing hand of cards. "All right," I said. "Let's see what you people did." I tore open the oldest one first. Past due notice, $90 assessment. The next late fee applied, $25. Then, second notice, $90 plus fees. The numbers marched down the page like they were proud of themselves. Every letter had more bold text, more capital letters. Failure to remit. Subject to further action. Per bylaws, Furosher 1207. I opened another, and another. The fees stacked up small amounts that didn't look like much line by line until I added them in my head and felt my jaw tighten. One envelope had a red border along the top. I saved that one for last without really meaning to. Intent to levy the previous letter said, possible lien filing, lien, on my house, for a bill smaller than my truck's last brake job. I finally picked up the red-bordered envelope and tore it clean across. Final notice. Account action may occur. The words glared up at me. Below, in neat legal paragraphs, it spelled it out, continued non-payment. May result in third-party collections action, including, but not limited to account freeze or wage garnishment. At the bottom, in a script font some designer thought looked friendly, was the same name from every other page. Evelyn Hayes, Treasurer. I set the letter down on the table. My kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in a couple of inches while I was reading. The phone on the table lit up again. The banking app had refreshed on its own. The red banner didn't blink. It just sat there steady and smug. I stared at it at the legal hold notice at the pile of envelopes. They reached into my bank account. Over a late fee, I said. Saying it out loud didn't make it sound any less insane. But it did something else. It took the fear buzzing under my skin and froze it in place. Not the way my account was frozen. Cleaner. Sharper. Because if Maple Ridge thought this was just about $90 and some penalties they were about to learn, it was about something else entirely. You don't freeze a man's life over pocket change and expect him to shrug and mow his lawn. Not this man. The line at the Pine Harbor post office already wrapped halfway to the door. Retirees with utility bills, a young mom with a stroller, and returns a guy in a safety vest holding a padded envelope like it owed him money. I slid into the back the stack of HOA envelopes tucked under my arm like contraband. Overnight, they'd gone from junk mail to evidence. The overhead fan ticked. Somewhere in the back, a postage scale beeped. The place smelled like paper and dust and coffee nobody actually drinks. Morning Dalton. I turned. Ralph Bishop was 2 people behind me, coat unzipped, ball cap low. He'd retired from auditing 3 years back and taken up the full-time job of watching the town go sideways. "Hey, Ralph," I said. "You paying bills or just loitering for sport? Bit of both." He nodded at the envelopes. "That looks like trouble." "HOA," I said. He winced like I'd said root canal. "Maple Ridge." "Yeah." "Then it's not trouble," he said. "It's a business model." The woman ahead of us stepped out of line to dig through her purse and the whole snake of bodies shifted forward. A bell on the door chimed as somebody left. "Take a look over there," Ralph said, tilting his chin toward the bulletin board. "Same corkboard as always. Lost cats, lawn service flyers, a faded flyer for last year's chili cook-off. In the center, a crisp white sheet. Maple Ridge Estates, HOA. Courtesy reminder. I stepped out of line just enough to read it. Ralph followed. Addresses and lot numbers in neat rows. Columns, most current 30 days, 60 days, 90-plus days. At the bottom in small print names withheld for privacy. Only they weren't, not really. Next to one lot number someone had handwritten Dalton, 90-plus, and circled it in blue pen. My jaw clenched. You have got to be kidding me. Public shaming without technically naming Ralph said, "Cute workaround. Anyone who knows the neighborhood can connect the dots." "That's my house," I said. "That's my name." "Yeah," he said, "it is." The sounds of the post office printer's shuffling feet-low conversation faded some. The board in front of me felt too quiet. "You know what I see when I look at that?" Ralph asked. "I see my business nailed to a wall," I said. "I see cash flow," he replied. "This HOA runs on late fees, Mike. It's a machine. Dues pay the basics. Late fees pay the extras, decorations, events, projects. The board dreams up. They froze my account over $90 and some decorations. You're thinking about the amount he said. They're thinking about the pattern. 10 guys behind on $90 plus fees plus penalties, now you're talking real money. You seen this before I asked. Ralph snorted. I've seen boards in 3 towns try some version of it. You start seeing fewer regular assessments and more administrative charges. You know they're plugging holes somewhere. I looked down at the envelopes in my hand. They say I'm past due. I know I paid. Bank statement shows it. Then somebody's either diverting payments, he said, or they're letting late fees snowball on purpose. Either way, they found a way to turn a neighbor's mistake into a revenue stream. That's not just a machine, I said. That's a racket. Same difference when you're the one under it. We shuffled forward. A clerk called next, and a man with a shoebox stepped up to the counter. Why the bulletin board, I asked. They already have my address. They already send threats. Pressure, Ralph said. Most people will pay anything to avoid being embarrassed. They don't need to sue you if you cave first. Well, they skipped a step, I said. Went straight from angry letters to reaching into my bank. You tell your bank it was HOA related, he asked. Yeah. They just shrugged and said, third-party order. Ralph shook his head. If they froze you once, they'll do it again. And next time they'll say, you knew the rules, Mr. Dalton. I slid my thumb under the flap of one of the thicker envelopes. Intent to levy was printed at the top same date as the courtesy reminder. They weren't warning me. They were lining things up. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Intent to levy. Account action. Bylaw Sertuatu 07. They'd put their intentions in writing and then pinned the results to a public corkboard. Ralph shifted his weight beside me. Mike. Yeah. You need to dig into their finances, he said quietly. If they're this aggressive on the surface, something underneath is rotting. And guys like you are how they plug the hole. I looked at my name on the board one more time, circled for anyone who cared to look. The clerk called next again. Yeah, I said. I think it's time we see what they're really running over there. I spread everything out on the workbench like parts from an engine I was about to rebuild. HOA letters on the left. Bank printouts on the right. Receipts and check stubs in the middle. The garage smelled like oil and old sawdust the way it had since the kids were little, and I still pretended I'd finish every project I started out here. The little space heater hummed in the corner. A fly tapped against the fluorescent light cover too stubborn to die or leave. I pulled the latest bank statement from the pile and pressed it flat under my palm. Halfway down the page, just under the regular charges and deposits, there it was in capital letters. Legal hold. Maple Ridge Estates HOA. Seeing it on the app had been bad. Seeing it in black and white on an official statement was worse. This wasn't a glitch. It was the system doing exactly what someone had told it to do. Thought you'd be out here, Ralph's voice called from the open side door. Door was unlocked, I said. Either you or the HOA was bound to walk in. He stepped inside, stomped the snow off his boots. Well, I don't bring lawyers, and I don't freeze bank accounts, so I'd say you got the better intruder. He eyed the mess on the bench. You starting a scrapbook evidence, I said. Or confetti, depending on how this goes. He pulled up an upside-down milk crate and sat. Walk me through it. I slid the statement over to him and tapped the line. They did it. Not a threat, not a maybe. Legal hold right there, triggered by Maple Ridge. He read it, lips moving just enough to prove it wasn't just his eyes working. Date of hold lines up with that final notice day after I said. They didn't waste time. And these he asked, nodding at the letters. Every time they said I was late, every fee they stacked. Plus, the months I actually paid. I grabbed another sheet, pointed at the draft marks. Look, auto draft to Maple Ridge on the 15th 3 months in a row. They cashed those. Then suddenly I'm past due anyway. Ralph whistled low, double dipping. That's what it looks like. He picked up a receipt, then another, lining them up by date the way someone else might line up cards. I could almost see the old auditor brain clicking back on behind his eyes. You ever heard of the Daltons? He asked suddenly. I blinked. I am a Dalton. No, he said. The other Daltons, over on Cedar View, cousins of the plumber. They got frozen last year. Same HOA. I frowned. What happened to them? Same story, Ralph said. Fees piled up on paper even after they'd paid. They didn't have the patience or the proof, so they sold and moved out to the county. HOA told everyone they couldn't keep up with community standards. Did they deserve that, I asked. Ralph shook his head. They got behind once when his wife had surgery. After that, it was like Maple Ridge had their thumb on their neck. The heater clicked, cycling off. The silence made the papers on the bench louder somehow. So it's not just me, I said. This stuff never is, Ralph replied. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin, beat-up laptop. Scoot over. I moved aside and he set it on the cleanest patch of the bench, fingers already tapping the keys. The screen glowed to life, casting both of our faces in a cold, pale light. You ever look up your HOA's filings? He asked. I read the bylaws when we moved in, I said. That's about it. Bylaws are what they wave in your face, he said. I'm more interested in what they file with the state and the county. He opened a browser window, typed fast, then squinted. Nonprofit reports, property tax records lender notices. Lines of text scrolled by full of numbers and names. My eyes glazed over quick. Ralph's didn't. Here we go, he murmured. Pine County Recorder. Maple Ridge Estates Association. He clicked into a PDF. This one's from 3 years ago. Mortgage release on a small common area loan. That's normal. Another click. This one is not. He turned the screen so I could see. A line near the top read Facility Loan. Pine Harbor Credit Union. Borrower, Maple Ridge Estates. HOA secured by Common Area Improvements. When did that get filed, I asked. Looks like 2 years back. He scrolled. Amortization schedule interest rate. His finger tapped the touchpad. Here. Modification notice. Delinquent as of Q2 last year. Payments in arrears. Delinquent, I repeated. So they're behind. On their own loan. Ralph nodded slowly. And according to this, they restructured once. Higher interest penalties. Let me guess, I said. About when did that happen? He backed out of the document, clicked into another tab. You got your first late notice. What spring? Yeah. He pulled the closest HOA letter off the bench and checked the date. Spring, he confirmed. And look here, your first administrative assessment lines up with the date they fell behind on their facility loan. I stared at the letter in his hand, then at the numbers on the screen. You think they're using late fees to cover their own debt? I think they discovered that being behind on a big note is a lot less scary if you can turn every non-compliant homeowner into an interest payment, Ralph said. The idea settled in my gut like bad coffee. It fit too well. The freeze, the stacking fees, the public shaming on the bulletin board. They froze me because I was late, I said, testing the sentence. Ralph raised an eyebrow. I shook my head. No, they froze me because they're broke. For a moment, the only sound in the garage was the faint buzz of the fluorescent light. The heater kicked back on with a hollow thump. Ralph closed the laptop slowly. If that loan's in trouble, he said, there's one question that matters more than any other. What's that? He looked at me, eyes sharper than they'd been all morning. Who actually owns that loan? Now, the Pine Harbor Credit Union lobby had that manufactured calm that never fooled anyone. Soft music, fake plant in the corner, a TV on mute, playing a loop about community lending while everyone waited for bad news or less money than they hoped for. I stood in front of the kiosk and tapped the screen. Please wait, it said. A little circle spun lazily next to a representative will be with you shortly. Printer, somewhere behind the counter, let out a long whir, spitting out forms for somebody else's headache. Next up, Mr. Dalton, a woman called. I turned. She wore a name badge, Sandra Loan Services, and a carefully neutral expression. That's me, I said. Right this way. She led me down a short hallway into a small, glass-walled office. Table, 2 chairs, a monitor turned just enough that the customer couldn't see everything, only enough to feel like they were included. There was a faint smell of toner and new paper. Have a seat, she said, sliding into the chair on the other side. What can we help you with today? I sat, set my folder on the table, and folded my hands over it. I've got a question about a loan, not mine. Her eyebrows flicked up. Okay. It's about Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, I said. I'm a homeowner there. Something twitched behind her eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. I see, she said. And what is your concern as it relates to their account that I said depends on what their account looks like? She sat back slightly. I'm not able to disclose personal financial information about another party. Understood, I said. I'm not asking for their balance or their social security number. I'm asking a simple question as a member whose bank account was frozen over their fees. Are they current on their obligations with you? She considered me for a moment, weighing whatever training manual she'd memorized against whatever reality she'd been dealing with. Mr. Dalton Maple Ridge is a corporate borrower, she said. They have a facility loan here that relates to improvements on their common areas. That much is a matter of public record. I've seen the filings, I said. What I haven't seen is whether they're paying. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. I leaned in just enough. They used our HOA dues to take on debt in the association's name. Then they reached into my personal account over a late fee. If they're doing that while they're in default with you, that's not just something my neighbors and I care about. That's something the state might care about. She looked at me differently then. A little less like a customer, a little more like a problem she hadn't been trained to ignore. Give me a moment, she said. Her fingers clacked on the keys. The monitor refreshed. From where I sat, I could see lines of text and numbers, but not the details. A heading at the top read Maple Ridge Estates HOA. Facility Loan. She scrolled lips pressing together. Mr. Dalton, she said quietly, I can't share everything on this screen with you, but I can answer a yes or no question. Okay, I said. Are they current? She hesitated. The printer out in the lobby whirred again. No, she said finally. They are not. How far behind? She glanced at the screen, then back at me. They missed 3 consecutive payments last year. We executed a modification agreement. Since then, their payment history has been inconsistent. Missed 3, I said. You gave them more rope. That's one way to put it, she said. The monitor flashed a small icon. She clicked it. A side panel opened that I could only see the edge of, but a line in bold caught my eye. Eligible for reassignment. What does that mean? I asked. She followed my gaze, realized what I'd seen, and turned the monitor a fraction away. Too late. Facility loans of this type, she said carefully, can be reassigned or sold to another qualified party under certain conditions. It's one of the ways credit unions manage risk. Is Maple Ridge's loan eligible for that? I asked. According to the system, yes, she said. It is flagged as eligible for reassignment. My heart thumped once hard. So, hypothetically, I said if someone were to meet whatever conditions you have, they could buy that note. Hypothetically, she said, picking each word like it might explode. We would review any qualified offer and decide whether reassignment is in the institution's best interest. My phone buzzed gently in my jacket pocket. I glanced down. Text from Ralph. How's it look? Remember, whoever buys their note holds the leverage. I looked back up at the screen. And if the note changes hands, I asked. What happens to Maple Ridge? The borrower, she said, dropping into banker mode, remains obligated under the same terms unless renegotiated by the new note holder. Payments would be remitted to the new creditor instead of us. So their payment structure, I said slowly, belongs to whoever owns that note. That's the nature of a secured loan? Yes. I leaned back, feeling the chair creak. Are there any special conditions on that note? Anything that kicks in when they miss payments? She hesitated again, then turned back to the screen. There is a penalty clause, she admitted. Most facility loans have a penalty clause for delinquency. How bad, Mr. Dalton? I really can't. Is it just late fees or something more? Her eyes scanned a line, then another. She swallowed. The clause says that if 3 payments are missed after modification, the scheduled payment amount adjusts. Adjusts how? She didn't look at me. It doubles. The word sat between us. Doubles, I repeated. She nodded once. The penalty clause for missed payments is severe. It's meant to discourage chronic delinquency. I absorbed that. Maple Ridge behind on a loan with a clause that could double what they owed each month. A board that had turned my single late notice into a cascade of fees. A treasurer who didn't blink at sending final notice. Account action may occur to the people she was supposed to serve. Whoever holds the note, I said quietly, holds the leverage. Sandra glanced at me like she wanted to ask what I planned to do with that thought, then thought better of it. I can't advise you on what to do with this information, she said. But if you are concerned, as a member, there are channels, regulators, member meetings, independent counsel. I'll take it under advisement, I said. One more thing. If the note is reassigned, how would Maple Ridge find out? We would issue a formal notice, she said. And the new creditor would too. All by the book. All by the book, I echoed. On the screen, just before she clicked away, I caught a glimpse of a single line in the loan profile. I shifted slightly, angling my phone in my palm. The monitor's reflection hit the glass wall just enough. Penalty payment doubles upon 3 missed payments. I tapped my screen as if checking the time and snapped a photo, the click muffled by my thumb. Thank you for your time, I said, standing. Of course, she replied. If Maple Ridge reaches out about their loan, we'll handle that directly with them. I suspect I'll be having my own conversation, I said. When I stepped back into the lobby, the TV was still looping the same community lending video. Out of the front windows, I could see my silver truck idling at the curb. Ralph's silhouette in the driver's seat, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. I slid my phone back into my pocket, feeling the faint warmth of the screenshot. For the first time since my account froze, I wasn't just looking at what they'd done to me. I was looking at what someone could do to them. The clubhouse looked different at night, too much fluorescent light, not enough air. A projector hummed in the corner, its fan rattling like it had been running for years without a break. Rows of folding chairs filled the room, legs scraping the linoleum as neighbors shifted for space. I grabbed one near the aisle, the metal cold under my hand. Evelyn stood at the front, tapping her laptop. Her voice carried that brittle calm she used whenever she wanted to sound in control. Let's get started, she said. Tonight is about financial responsibility. A few people coughed. Someone muttered, yeah, theirs. Ralph sat 2 seats away from me, arms folded, gray beard catching the overhead light. He gave me a look that said, it's time. Evelyn clicked to the first slide. HOA revenue bars, expense categories, reserve fund projections. Everything looked clean, neat, controlled. But the last slide, the one she kept skipping past, sat minimized in the corner of the screen. A faint title read, Loan Delinquent. Internal use only. I made a mental note. Foreshadow confirmed. The smell of stale cookies sat heavy near the back table. A coffee urn hissed softly. Folding chairs creaked as people leaned forward, restless. Evelyn cleared her throat. We are enforcing collections to keep Maple Ridge solvent. Late fees are not optional. They ensure fairness. I stood. Metal chair legs screeched behind me. Heads turned. A ripple passed across the room. Mike Evelyn said sharply, We're not doing open comments yet. We're doing them now, I replied. I took a certified envelope from my jacket pocket, unfolded the paper, and held it up high enough for the front rows to see. This, I said, is a bank notice. The room fell silent. They froze my checking account. I continued. Over a late fee. Gasps, murmurs. One man whispered, They did that to you too. I turned to the notice so the projector light caught the printed stamp. Legal hold. Maple Ridge HOA. The projector hummed louder, almost like it was listening. Evelyn forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Dalton, personal grievances belong in private discussions with the board. No, I said. This isn't private. You made it public when you reached into my bank account. A woman in the back shot up. They froze mine in March, said it was a clerical error. Another added, My husband got a lien threat over $82. People shifted angrily. Chairs scraped. Someone's keys jingled nervously. Evelyn raised both hands. Everyone. Please, late fees are necessary because some members refuse to. Because you're broke, I said. The room snapped still. Ralph leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Show them, he whispered. I stepped toward the projector. Evelyn instinctively moved to block me, but I angled slightly, tapped the laptop trackpad, and the minimized slide expanded across the screen. A single line glowed in pale blue text. Loan delinquent. 3 missed payments. A hush dropped over the clubhouse like a curtain. I pointed at the words. You froze my account while hiding your own debt. Murmurs turned into open outrage. Feet shuffled. Someone slammed their palm on the back of a chair. Another man said, We've been paying dues on time. Where's the money going? Evelyn's face tightened. This presentation is being misinterpreted. The delinquency is temporary. We are exploring restructuring options. Ralph stood now, shoulders squared. Tell them about the penalty clause. Evelyn shot him a warning look. Enough. I raised my voice just enough to carry over the crowd. The loan doubles its payment after 3 missed installments. That's why the board is squeezing us. Freezing accounts, issuing threats. They're feeding a hole they dug. The room trembled with anger, a restrained buzzing tension the kind older men hold in their jawlines and their fists without raising them. One woman stared at Evelyn. Is that true? Evelyn swallowed. This meeting is adjourned. She reached for the projector remote. The screen went black. Projector fan wound down into a shaky silence. Then Ralph stepped forward, planting his boots with a soft thunk on the linoleum. No, he said, voice steady. It just started. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in something sharper purpose. I folded the bank notice back into its envelope, sensing the shift. For the first time, the board wasn't the one doing the cornering. The loan officer closed the glass door behind us, the latch giving a soft click that sounded more final than it should have. Rain tapped against the window, streaking down in silver lines. He placed a thick folder on the desk, cream-colored heavy, stamped with a red title that looked like it belonged in a courtroom. Assignment of note. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a casual form or a payment plan. This was the document that determined who held the debt of the entire Maple Ridge HOA. The officer adjusted his glasses. Everything's in order, Mr. Dalton. He flipped the folder open. Inside were crisp pages, each one tabbed with yellow flags. Signature initial borrower. Acknowledgement creditor change. And on the top page under the bold header sat a smaller stamp. Notice to borrower. Change of creditor. I exhaled slowly. Foreshadow delivered. The loan officer slid a pen toward me. This authorizes the reassignment. Once it's signed and sealed, Maple Ridge's note transfers to you. My hand hovered over the pen. A week ago, I was just a guy trying to pay for breakfast at the diner. Now, I was about to become the creditor of the board that froze my bank account. I picked up the pen. Rain pattered harder. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Somewhere outside the cubicle, a printer started and stopped with a tired whir. Start here, he said, tapping the first tab. I signed. Initialed. Signed again. Checked an acknowledgement box. Signed the next page and the next. Every stroke felt like a gear turning, like a machine that had been grinding against me was suddenly shifting directions. The officer flipped to the final page. This is the execution signature. Once you sign, I'll notarize, stamp, and record it. Turnaround's immediate. My hand steadied. I signed. He slid the folder away with a practiced motion, pulled a seal from a drawer, and pressed it into the paper. The embossing tool made a firm thunk, a small ceremonial sound that carried more weight than any gavel. He held up the completed packet. Congratulations. As of today, he tapped the seal. The HOA owes you. A quiet beat passed. The air in the cubicle felt different, lighter, sharper. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Ralph. I stepped outside into the hallway, the carpet muffling my footsteps. Rain hammered the metal awning outside. I answered. Yeah, I said. Ralph didn't waste time. You didn't just fight back. He paused, letting it land. You just became their bank. I leaned against the wall, letting the words sit. So, every payment they've been dodging? Goes through you now, Ralph finished. And any penalty clause. Your call. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. They're going to flip. They will, he said, but they can't stop it. The note was open for reassignment. They missed 3 payments. You stepped in. That's how the rules work. Rules. The same rules they used to freeze my account. For the first time, those rules tilted in my direction. A notification pinged across my phone. HOA special meeting. Financial integrity. Tonight, 7:00 p.m. I stared at it for a long second. Rain drummed above me like a countdown. Ralph chuckled lightly on the line. They must have figured out someone bought the note. Maybe I said. But they don't know who. And you plan on telling them I looked through the glass toward the cubicle. The loan officer was gently arranging the paperwork, stacking the newly stamped pages like they were pieces of a puzzle he'd finished. I straightened. Yeah, I said quietly, it's time to show them integrity. Ralph laughed once low and satisfied. Mike, this is going to be one hell of a meeting. I slipped the folder under my arm, the embossed seal warm against my palm. Prop number 2 had fully activated, no longer a clue, but leverage. The kind they couldn't freeze, ignore, or bury. I stepped into the rain. Each drop hit the pavement with purpose, like the world had finally decided to sync with the rhythm of the moment. Tonight, Maple Ridge would learn a new definition of accountability. And, for the first time since the freeze, I felt steady. Almost ready. The clubhouse had never been this full. Folding chairs lined both walls. People stood along the back arms, crossed jaws tight. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a constant, uneasy vibration in the ceiling tiles. I stepped inside holding a single sheet of paper, white sharp-edged, stamped in red. Change of creditor. Ralph sat in the front row. No leaning back, no blending in. He met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. Tonight wasn't about rumor. Tonight was record. Evelyn tapped the mic, producing a quick feedback squeal that made several people wince. Everyone, please, there's been some confusion in the community regarding our financial structure. The board is aware of the rumors circulating, but... She smiled the way people do when they hope no one asks the real questions. I walked down the aisle. The room shifted. Whispers collapsed into silence. Even the projector hum seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn tried again. Before we proceed, I'd like to remind everyone that spreading misinformation can damage. I reached the mic. She instinctively stepped back. I unfolded the paper slowly, loud enough that the creases crackled through the speakers. Maple Ridge, I said, letting my voice carry. As of this morning, I am your creditor. A ripple moved through the room like someone dropping a stone into a still lake. Mouths opened. Someone whispered. What another stood up straight as if waking from a long sleep. Evelyn blinked. That is not accurate. You're misunderstanding the terms. I held up the page so the overhead lights caught the embossed seal. This is the assignment of note. Recorded. Sealed. Effective immediately. A man in the third row leaned forward. You bought the HOA's mortgage. I nodded once. Yes. The room erupted into low-level murmurs, fear, shock, but also something sharper. Satisfaction. Evelyn tried to salvage control. Even if that were true, which it isn't, our payments remain unchanged by. Stop, I said. Then I placed the second page on the podium, a clean printout, the loan clause visible in bold text. Let me read something into the record. Ralph's eyes sharpened. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. I cleared my throat. Section 4C. After 3 missed payments, the monthly obligation is automatically doubled. Dead silence. I set my finger on the line below it. Maple Ridge HOA triggered that clause last quarter. The mic hissed softly. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." I lifted my gaze, and as of today, I let the pause hang long enough for every heartbeat in the room to sink. Your payment is doubled. Gasps, a few groans. 2 people actually clapped before catching themselves. The board members looked like statues, eyes wide, lips tight, hands perfectly still. Evelyn's face drained of color. She reached for the mic, but her hand hovered without touching it. One resident near the aisle spoke up. "So they froze our accounts, while missing their own payments." Another chimed in, "They fined us to cover their mistakes." Whispers rose layered and sharp. Ralph stood leaning toward me, not loud but audible enough for the first rows to catch it. This is what accountability looks like. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to underline his words. Evelyn finally found her voice. We need a recess, a private board session. This is highly irregular." I shook my head. "No. What's irregular is freezing residents' bank accounts over a late fee while your own mortgage is delinquent." She opened her mouth closed. It tried again. Nothing came out. A man near the front lifted his phone. "Is this public record?" I nodded. "Then we all deserve answers tonight." The room burst in agreement, firm, frustrated, unified. Evelyn backed toward the table behind her. She wasn't running, she just didn't seem to know where to stand now that the authority she relied on had shifted. I held up the creditor notice again. "This document changes nothing about the rules. It only changes who enforces them. And now, those rules point back at the people who made them." A few residents stood forming an unplanned semicircle of support. The board members exchanged frantic looks. The community had woken up. And tonight, they were not on Evelyn's side. Evelyn didn't walk out. She sat there for a long second binder clutched to her chest, eyes fixed somewhere above everyone's heads. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the room again, Mike lying mute on the table. Then she stood. The binder slipped from her grasp and hit the table with a flat thud, papers inside, shifting like they'd finally decided they were done being stacked the wrong way. "I can't continue in this environment," she said stiffly. "If the community has lost confidence in this board, then I will not stand in the way of change." Her voice wobbled on that last word. "Not much. Just enough." A man in the back called, "So is that a resignation or another late notice?" A few people laughed, short, sharp, tired. Evelyn straightened. "Fine," she said. "I resign as treasurer, effective immediately." The room exhaled in a single collective breath. Near the side wall, a man in a navy blazer stepped forward, opening a slim portfolio. I'd noticed him earlier sitting quietly taking notes. Now he flipped a badge toward the board, not dramatically, just enough for them to see. "Compliance office," he said calmly. "I'll be noting the resignation and the financial disclosures for the record." He pulled a form from his folder pen already poised. The board members suddenly looked like they'd like to be anywhere else. The meeting dissolved into clusters. Some people headed for the door, shaking their heads. Others moved forward, voices overlapping. On the clubhouse porch, the air felt cooler, softer. Yellow light spilled from the doorway onto the concrete. Crickets chirped beyond the parking lot. The tension that had filled the room seeped out onto the night air, thinning with every word spoken. Neighbors formed an impromptu line without meaning to, each one drifting my way with some version of the same story. They threatened to freeze us over trash cans. They sent my wife 3 final notices in 1 month. They told my mother she'd lose access to the pool if she asked too many questions. The compliance officer stood a few steps away, clipboard in hand, quietly jotting notes as people spoke. No drama, no speeches, just record. Ralph came to my side, hands in his jacket pockets. "You see their faces when you read that clause?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. They looked like they just realized the rules worked both ways. We watched the little clusters of conversation shift and break. A middle-aged man in a work jacket stepped up to me, hesitated, then stuck out his hand. "I'm Dave," he said. "Lot 27. They told me if I didn't pay the administrative review fee, they'd explore stronger remedies." "Did you pay it?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I got kids. I couldn't risk them messing with our accounts." We shook hands. His grip was firm, not showy. His eyes held that mix of embarrassment and relief men get when they finally admit they were scared. He squeezed once. Finally, someone fought back. The words landed heavier than anything that had been said inside. "Not just me. I said. You all showed up. That's what changed this. He shook his head. Maybe. But you were the one they froze, and you're the one they answer to now. The compliance officer stepped closer. Mr. Dalton, he said quietly, I'll be requesting full access to the HOA's books over the last 3 years. Given tonight's developments, I'd also recommend the community move quickly on new elections. Ralph answered before I could. Already on it. We've got 3 people willing to serve who think bylaws means something other than weapon. The officer nodded once. Document everything. Keep this procedural. You've done the hard part. 2 weeks later, smoke from a dozen grills drifted across Maple Ridge like an apology. The Saturday BBQ had started as a joke on the neighborhood group chat. If the board can freeze our accounts, someone wrote the least they can do is pay for hot dogs. When the dust settled, everyone chipped in anyway. Old habits. Kids chased each other around the playground. Classic rock played low from someone's portable speaker. The gate at the entrance, the same one that once carried a sign about enforcement actions, now had a fresh coat of paint and a simple plaque. Welcome home. Maple Ridge. No threats. No fee schedule. Near the picnic tables, a fresh bulletin board stood with a single laminated sheet pinned dead center. Financial reform. Passed 27-3. Late FE caps adopted. No third-party account freezes. Full quarterly reporting required. People actually smiled when they read it. Ralph handed me a paper plate loaded with ribs. You realize you could have tightened that loan and made them crawl, he said. Thought about it, I admitted. And I looked around the kids, the grills, the easy way people stood near each other now. I told the credit union I'd refinance the note into a friendlier schedule. I said, lower rate, longer term. No surprise penalties. The community eats the debt either way. Might as well make it something we can live with. No revenge, he asked. I already doubled their payment once I said. That was enough to expose the problem. I don't need to break the place I live in to prove a point. He nodded slowly. You're a better man than some of us. Don't spread that rumor, I said. At the far end of the yard, a folding table had a sign taped to the front. New board elections. Sign in. 3 names now sat on the elected line. All people who'd spent more time mowing their own lawns than sitting in closed-door meetings. The compliance officer had come and gone, leaving behind a list of recommended reforms and a polite but unmistakable warning they'd be watching. Later that evening, when the sun slid low and the grills burned down to coals, I stepped away and drove home. In the garage, I flipped on the light. The workbench looked the same oil stains clutter tools. The space heater hummed in the corner. On the wall above the bench, I'd hung a single sheet in a cheap black frame. Final notice. Account action may occur. The old HOA letter, the one that had started all of this. I looked at it for a long moment, a reminder, not of what they'd done, but of what I'd let slide before they did it. My phone buzzed. A message from the new board president. We're keeping everything transparent. Audit, dates, minutes, all of it. I typed back, good, because now we all know how fast the rulebook can change hands. I set the phone down the garage quiet except for the heater and the faint tick of the overhead light. Out on the street, I could hear faint laughter from the last of the BBQ stragglers. No one was talking about freezes or liens or stronger remedies. For the first time in a long time, Maple Ridge felt less like a trap and more like what it was supposed to be. A place you could live in, without waiting for the next envelope to land like a threat. The night after the new board was sworn in, I stood in my garage, the framed final notice catching the porch light like a posted warning about where blind authority can lead. The fresh reform plaque at the clubhouse still smelled of new laminate proof that due process can correct what fear once allowed. I realized accountability isn't loud, it's steady, and it starts the moment people refuse to look away. When Dave shook my hand at the BBQ and said, finally, someone fought back, it wasn't praise. It was relief that the rulebook finally belonged to everyone again. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.